Welcome to Her Story, the history of Southeast Asia told from her perspective. We'll discover historical figures, matriarchal societies, and contemporary female icons, and maybe learn about ourselves along the way. I'm Magas Ramirez. This is part 3 of Prinsesa Urduja of Tawalisi, where we are still joined by Tiffanie Ang, director of the short film Prinsesa Urduja. Let's get right to it.
Noong unang panahon, isang maganda at magiting na prinsesa ang nanirahan sa kaharian ng Tawalisi, ang lupang mas kilala ngayon bilang Pangasinan. Si Prinsesa Urduja at ang kanyang kapatid na si Haring Mahabala ang nagtutulungan sa pamumuno ng Tawalisi. Taglay nila ang karunungan at katapangang kinakailangan para maipagtanggol ang kaharian sa kung sino man ang nais sumakop dito. Isang araw, habang nagbabantay sila sa may tabing dagat, may narinig silang malakas na sigaw. Tulong! Agad itong pinuntahan ng hari at inatasan ng prinsesa na manatili sa tabing dagat upang magbantay.
Our listeners have heard the official blurb of the film, but how would you describe it now, several years later, looking back? What stands out to you about that experience?
Well, in describing, I guess I would always say that it's a fantasy drama anyway. A fantasy drama film that interweaves the story of a soldier's wife named Rita and Pangasinan's legendary warrior Princess Urduja, as these two characters face grief and an uncertain future. It's also worth noting that Rita's kids, Angela and Noah, who recounts the story of Princess Urduja in an endearing way. So they are the characters. And then I wrote the story of the short film Princess Urduja at the time when I was still grieving of my lola's passing. My lola's name is Sananda. She is of Pangasinan descent. And I think the film Princess Urduja is somehow my way of memorializing her. Because for one, she's also a wife of a soldier. So that's where Rita's character was based from.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and Princess Urduja's character pays homage to her as a woman of courage and bravery for looking after her family after being widowed. And it generally pays tribute to her roots and ancestry, which will find its way back to Pangasinan. So, I think more than anything, the short film is my way of honoring her. And I couldn't forget that feeling I had when I started to join film festivals because the film went from the Philippines, China, US, and then Malaysia. It felt like I was bringing my Lola to these places that she has never been because she never traveled overseas. And so I feel like through this film, it's like she has traveled with me since her name is billed in the credit section, like as my way of memorializing her and just giving respect. So that though she's no longer with us in person, through the film, it's as if she's there in spirit. So that's it.
I'm sorry, of course, to hear about your Lola's passing.
Yeah,
So, in a way, I guess her passing also brought you to her homeland, her
exactly.
hometown.
Exactly. Basically, Princess Urdu is like just a culmination of everything. And so, I'm quite surprised, even until now. I mean, I just posted an IG story earlier that says, "Nah, this film surprises me in like a lot of reasons." And later on, I'll enumerate them. But yeah, I mean, film can really be powerful, no? And that's
Yeah,
just my that's just my conclusion at this point.
I think what stood out to me when I was watching the short film was how still everything was. Like even when even when the frame was moving, there was a stillness
Yeah.
in the film that felt a lot like sorrow without saying anything.
Yeah.
So that was intentional. I think that was,
Yes.
you really intended it to be.
One scene that really stood out to me was when not to spoil everyone, but there was this one point when Rita had to talk to Angela, and I
Yes.
I really sort of intended it to be like a still shot all throughout. So the actions, there's no cuts. It's like a long emotion.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I had to like capture it because I guess that's the power of like you being there.
I really appreciated how it said so much about grieving and
Yes.
sorrow and recovery without a lot of script. Like it was
No
really,
words, right?
yeah, it
Doesn't
was,
have to say anything.
did not have to say anything, but you felt through just the movement and the angles and the lighting and everything how what the characters were going through. And that's something I think, something people need to remember when they're making films. It's really about the mise-en-scène, and you don't
Yeah.
have to throw a lot
Yep.
of bells and whistles into your film to convey a feeling.
Yeah. Even the most powerful, at least scenes for me, are the simplest ones. There's something about simplicity that's just so moving and so striking. So yeah, I mean, even in the since I'm a digital content producer, normally people nowadays they would just play with sound effects and everything, just throw everything there. But for me, I always appreciate it when there's silence.
I also
So,
appreciated that about your film because when I was watching it, I found myself relaxing and just going on this
mhm.
journey. And even if the film was short, like there are frames there that I still remember
Aw.
because of just how quiet everything was, and
Yes.
how much meaning there was in the stillness. And so taking off from that,
Mm-hmm.
can you tell us about the process, like casting someone to play Urduja and Rita, how you designed their costumes, how you found the locations?
Yeah. This is the part where like everything just went back like it's a time travel, but it's really a fun story to share. So hopefully you guys can what do you call this? Like go through it's a lengthy account. So pardon me, but I'll make sure it's going to be fun. So as a filmmaker, my approach is very much practical. So as I mentioned earlier, Pangasinan became my central point because everything led there, logistics. My relatives were there, so they were very much willing to help out, like in cooking meals for the crew, even all the stuff that happens behind the camera. The casting for Urduha, on the other hand, was pretty easy. Because at the time I was writing the story, I knew beforehand that the physical features of Princess Urduha fits and perfectly fits my closest friend in high school, and her name is Valerie Santos. And I just want to acknowledge her sorry in this podcast because she might be listening to this particular episode, even though she's already based in UK. So if you are here, hi Val.
Hey, Valerie.
Yes, my Princess Urduha, I miss you, dear, and thank you again for accepting the role of Urduha. I wouldn't have it any other way.
She's not a professional actress.
No. She's we've been together in theater. Like we do
Ah,
plays in high school. But yeah, nothing really professional. Like she doesn't really earn from it. It's just really like a passion during our
passion.
high school years. Yeah.
But her movements I found were very deliberate, and
Aw.
she had a great awareness of the camera, and that really sold the, she didn't have to say anything to
Yes.
sell the power behind
Yeah.
Urdugan. So I really appreciated that. And then Rita, you mentioned in a different interview, was also from Pangasinan.
Yes. And funny how Rita's character came through, because for her character, we sent out casting calls, I think a month before filming. And I remember this vividly. Ian Galigas, the one who actually played the role of Rita, messaged me on Facebook as soon as she saw the casting call advertisement. Because number one, she said she was from Pangasinan and she really wanted the role. And then she knew the local language and she even knew how to do fight scenes. So originally, through her message, I sort of understood that she was actually aiming to play the actual Princess Urduja. But here's the thing, I had reservations because I was really on the lookout for someone to play Rita, which for me requires someone more experienced in acting. Because but since she wanted Urduja's role first, so I told myself, okay, let's wait until the auditions. And there were, I think, 4 or 5 women who auditioned for Rita before Ian came in, but I wasn't happy. I think I had one backup for her just in case. I was hoping Ian could still make it for the auditions because we were already done with the formal auditions and the room we used was already closed by the time that she came. And I think I was just waiting outside for like 1 hour because she came from taping that time. So I waited for her. I think 1 hour later, when everybody is finished already, I remember it was already dark that time. We were in UP Film building or lobby. And then she came, she read the lines, did the audition in front of me. Even though it was gloomy that time, the moment she read those lines, I knew. I knew already that the role of Rita will be hers. So the role fit her perfectly. I mean, she delivered so well. I didn't have to give so much instruction, and yeah, that's how Miss Ian Galigas was casted for the role of Rita. And so, Miss Ian, if you're listening,
Hello, Miss
thank you
Ian.
so much for your support for my film, and I hope we could see each other. I mean, the last time we saw each other, I think was my thesis defense. Oh, thesis defense? No, Cine Filipino, when I sent my film there. That was our last what do you call it? Last meeting. So I hope I could see you soon. So there.
There's a I think for Miss Ian there's a sort of kindness and generosity in her face. I don't know how to
Yeah.
explain this, but
But
it's
you
just
know
like it's a
what?
warm.
To be honest, she's really a quirky, like a funny person in I mean in face to face.
Hmm,
But she could carry like drama.
yeah,
I guess it comes from experience either way. I mean, she's been with lots of teleseries in EBS already. So
and
yeah,
she acts with her whole body also. So
yes.
it's a it's a nice thing to see because we see a lot of student films and it's just so different to see something like this come together. Um, I have a question about the costume for
Oh,
Urduha.
this
How
is
did that
fun.
happen? Yeah.
This is fun. As for the costume, my mom's hobby is sewing. She was the
Oh,
one who
this was
tailored.
a family project. This
Yes,
was really
this was really a family project because she was the one who tailored my school uniforms back in the day. And she even makes our echo bags at home. So I think for me, there's no other person I'd love to make the wardrobe of Urduha than my own mom. And I remember researching. No, I remember searching through Divisoria that time because it's a famous commerce center here in the Philippines for very low priced goods. And the fabrics of Urduha's outfit came from there. I personally picked the colors because that wardrobe of hers was inspired by the different paintings of Urduha by number one, Fernando Amorsolo, and then Botong Francisco. And if you could just side by side those paintings of theirs of Urduha, um, I mean the common thing is that there are red and gold hues. So even Haring Mahabala's costume, Urduha's brother in the film, that was owned by my mother also. And then the jewelry, everything was bought in the malls of Divisoria. And what's worth noting is the sword. Have you noticed the sword?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Yeah. So the sword is like I had to mention this because I had so much fun collaborating with the blacksmith in Tarlac for this
This
one.
was real? This was real.
Yeah, I had them customize it. I asked
Wow.
because there is this couple of blacksmith shops in Tarlac along MacArthur Highway, and I went into one, and then I just showed them, can you do this? This is how I wanted it to look like. And so yeah, just give us like this certain number of days, and then go back, and then you'll have it. So there, and then I remember being so giddy when I saw the finished product, and I still have it
And
with me at home.
did they have questions for you? Like, what is this for?
Yeah. Oh well, yeah. They asked na what's it for? Is it just for display at home? Yeah. And then I said, no, it's for a short film. Ah, okay. But here's interesting. Originally, I wanted it to be done in Pangasinan because I believe there's a blacksmith town in Pangasinan also. It's just that I couldn't go there. I think it's farther than our usual locations. But
The design for the sword also came from the paintings.
uh actually, it was my own like imagination of how I wanted it to be. So I sort of just drew it and then just showed them like, can you make it look like this one? And then they said, yeah, we can do that.
So, you mentioned King Mahabala, who
Yeah,
is,
yes.
where does he come from? I have not read about him or heard about him before. Was he a creation or?
Yeah. He was just a creation. I think by the time I was researching for like relatives of Urduha, I saw uh only recently have I seen the word or like the name Dalisay. Before the accounts I've seen, there's really no other name I could find. Like what's the name of her father or her brother. So it's something I just conceived from I just made it up.
There's
So
practically nothing about
yeah.
anybody else.
Yes.
It's just her.
Although, sorry, I really couldn't remember how I ended up with Mahabala, but I think it's like an old
Mm.
Tagalog terminology. I'm sorry. It's really something I just made up, so I couldn't give like a deep account
No,
into
it's
it.
fine. I also I do remember in the account of Ibn Battuta, he mentioned that Urduha had a brother who was
Yes.
transferred to rule over a different part of the kingdom, and then she was given dominion over the port area. So
Yes.
I was thinking like, oh, maybe Tiffany was thinking about that brother, and then she gave him a name. Like,
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, but I kind of deviated from how it was really originally because this is quite fictional anyway. But yeah, I what do you call this? It was inspired by that, knowing that she had a brother. It's just that that brother didn't have a name. So I had to like make up a certain name, and then I ended up with King or like Haring Mahabala.
so, looking back 7 years later, is there anything you would have done differently when you were making this film or for the editing?
Honestly, none. None. Well, just one very minor nitpick on production design, but I'll keep it a secret because it's not
So,
worth.
we don't notice that.
Yeah, so you won't notice. Yeah, it's not worth discussing anyway. But I guess from a standpoint, I mean from a recent standpoint or current standpoint, being now as a filmmaker with relatively more experience in life, I could definitely see now more areas where I could have made the story or screenplay have more deeper issues or like inject more human emotion. So again, Princess Urduha is not a perfect film. I mean, I can't perfect I mean film is subjective anyway, so you can't really
Mhm.
say that it should be perfect, and it's my debut film anyway, so I'm so amateur by that time of the necessary experience and emotions that come with telling a super moving story. So I guess my only
Mhm.
regret at this time is um although that's also the precise charm of the film, it's like a mural or concrete product already of who I was as a filmmaker that time when the film was conceived. So on that basis,
And you were a senior, right? You were like 20, 21 or
yeah,
something.
during that time, 20 or 21, I think 21, yes, because I was delayed for a year because I originally came from Department of Engineering.
Right. Which is
Oops.
interesting.
Sorry, deviating
That
from the
that was a jump from engineering to
yeah,
film, but
to film, yeah.
I'm really happy that you found your passion and you're doing what you love.
Thank you.
Um,
And you know what? I mean, just seeing how much I enjoy reminiscing all these things about the film. Like what? It's already been 7 years since it was produced. So my heart is just full of gratitude and love for this film. I mean, the mere opportunity of talking about it right now. I mean, what more can I ask for?
and I'm glad that this has provided you with that outlet. What do you want people to remember about Princess Urduja? Both the mythical historical figure and the story that you want to tell.
I want first to acknowledge like how she is or like what she is for me on a personal standpoint. And personally, she became like an actual representation of me, triumphantly rising from different situations, like from grief to acceptance and moving on. Especially at the time I was still processing the death of my grandmother. Also from failure to victory, because the first three film festivals that Princess Urduha competed, it didn't garner any awards. So I thought at least I made it to the official to the official selection. But lo and behold, 2 years after production, it got this recognition from a youth festival in Malaysia. And the biggest shock of my life was when it qualified to be a recipient of Ani Nandangal by NCCA. So that for me was like something big. So from super, what do you call this, like over on the ground confidence, like low self-esteem, like later on sort of redemption, like sort of what do you call it, vindication. and then
Mm.
and so I thought Princess Urduha is like a manifestation of that inner fire in my heart and spirit to just continually believe that good things will come to those who find the courage to get back on their feet when they stumble. And so for the audience, I think as a final word and encouragement for our listeners, Princess Urduha is more than just a warrior. It's not just about being a good fighter in battles and wars. But if you look closely in the accounts of Iban Batuta, she's practically depicted as a very educated woman, diplomatic in nature, great sense of dignity and pride, and as a leader of her people, very ambitious even. And so I hope it sort of inspires us also, and let this be her legacy to strive for excellence, be the best you can be with the gifts that you have. And if you think you don't have much talent or anything, just strive to learn something new every day. And to always, always present yourself in a dignified manner, because you are a human and you are a very valuable person. So I really hope and pray that gonna be her legacy for us.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. Thank you for doing this interview and thank you for doing the film. And honestly, it also inspires me to tell more stories, because there's space for history, and especially women's history. There's space for us, and it needs to be shared. And so, thank you, and I hope our listeners are also inspired to know more and do more for these stories to be heard.
Thank you so much for having me. And, I just hope the audiences enjoyed our episode today. And thank you for listening and having an interest in Princess Urduha. And I hope it sort of sparks like an interest to like other interesting. I mean, we have myriads of other characters, other humans to like study about and know about their story. So there, just keep on knowing them and just keep on noting all these wonderful things about them.
Thank you so much for listening to episode 10, Prinsesa Urduja of Tawalisi. Producing a podcast like this takes a lot of time and research. If you like what we do and want to support the next episodes, head on over to our Patreon. Thank you to Laura, Yati, Kara, and Mando for being there throughout this whole thing. So give us little as $1 to get a copy of the show notes with all the references, access to the close friends Instagram stories, a shout out at the end of the next episode, and the occasional bonus episode. And if you can't join us on Patreon, just tell your friends about this podcast. That works too. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at herstoryseapod. That's herstoryseapod.
You've heard of the terms colonization or decolonization in bits and pieces. But do you find European colonization too broad and too complicated to get into? Well, there is now a podcast for you. Join me, Fidelity, on an introduction through the history of colonization. We will cover not just the major wars and conquests that took place, but also the perspectives of people who have been neglected in the grand Eurocentric narrative of discovery in colonial lens. You can find the History of Colonization podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcast from.